The ox. The Tarlos lived on a small hill. As though it were not high enough, the house was raised up, as on invisible stilts, with a wooden flight of steps to the front door. Exposed and isolated, the wind striking at it from all quarters, it seemed to have no part with the surrounding landscape. Empty ploughed lands in winter time stretched away on all sides in wet steel curbs. At 7:30 every morning, Mrs. Tarlo pushed her great rusty bicycle down the hill. At 6 every evening, she pushed it back, loaded always with grey bundles of washing, oil cans, sacks, cabbages, bundles of old newspaper, boughs of wind-blown wood, bag of chicken food. The bicycle would never be ridden. It was a vehicle of necessity. Her relationship to it was that of a beast to a cart. Sloping along beside it, flat, heavy feet pounding painfully along under mud-stained skirts. Her face and body ugly with lumpy angels of bone, she was like a beast of burden. Coming out of the house, raised up even above the level of the small hill, she stepped into a country of wide horizons. This fact meant nothing to her. The world into which she moved was very small. From 6 to 9, she cleaned for 2 retired sisters. 9 to 12 for the retired photographer, 12:30 to 3 for the poultry farm, 4 to 6 for the middle-aged bachelor. She did not think of going beyond the 4 lines which made up the square of her life. She thought of other people going beyond them. She thought of other people going beyond them, but this was different. Staring down at a succession of wet floors, working always for other people against time, she had something got into the habit of not thinking about herself. She thought much in the same stolid pounding way as she pushed the bicycle of other people, in particular of Tarlo, more particularly of her 2 sons. She had married late. The boys were 9 and 13. She saw them realizing refined ambitions, making their way as assistants in shops, as clerks in offices, even as butlers. Heavily built, with faces having her own angular boniness, they moved with eyes on the ground. She had saved money for them. For 15 years, she had hoarded the scrubbing and washing money, keeping it in a brand bag under a mattress in the back bedroom. They did not know of it. She felt that no one, not even Tarlo, knew of it. Tarlo had a silver plate in his head. In his own eyes, it set him apart from other men. I got a plate in me head, solid silver, enough silver to make a dozen spoons and a bit over. Beat that. Wounded on the Marne, and now walking about with the silver plate in his head, Tarlo was a martyr. I didn't ought to stoop. I didn't ought to do nothing. By rights, I didn't ought to lift a finger. He was a hedge cutter. The lucky I am tall, else that job wouldn't be no good to me. He had bad days and good days, even days of genuine pain. Me plates hurting me, It's me, plate. By God, it will drive me so I don't know what I am doing. It's me, plate again. And he would stand wild and vacant, rubbing his hands through his thin black hair, clawing his scalp as though to wrench out the plate and the pain. Once a week, on Saturdays or Sundays, he came home a little tipsy, in a good mood, laughing to himself, riding his bicycle up the hill like some comic rider in a circus. Ah, too much to be damned, too much be damned. I can ride me bike, can't I? As long as I can ride me bike, I am all right. In the pubs, he had only one theme. I got a plate in me head, solid silver, recited in a voice challenging the world to prove it otherwise. All the time, Mrs. Tarlo saved money. It was her creed. Sometimes people went away and there was no cleaning. She then made up the gap in her life by other work, picking potatoes, planting potatoes, digging cabbages, spudding roots, pea picking, more washing. In the fields, she pinned up her skirt so that it stuck out behind her like a thick, steep tail, making her look like something bony ox. She did washing from 5 to 6 in the morning and again from 7 to 9 in the evening. Talk, taking in more washing taking in more washing, she tried to wash more quickly against time. Somehow she succeeded, so that from 9 to 10 she had time for ignoring. Somehow she succeeded, so that from 9 to 10 she had time for ironing. She worked by candlelight. Her movements were largely instinctive. She had washed and ironed for so long in the same way, at the same time and place, that she could have worked in darkness. There were some things even which could be done in darkness, and so at 10, with Thurlow and the sons in bed, she blew out the candle, broke up the fire, and sat holding the clothes or cleaning boots and thinking. Her thoughts, like her work, went always along the same lines towards the future, out into the resplendent avenues of ambitions, always for the two sons. There was a division in herself, the one part stolid and uncomplaining in perpetual labor, and the other fretful and almost desperate in an anxiety to establish a world beyond her own. She had saved £54. She would make it 100. How it was to be done, she could not think. She could not think. The boys were growing. The boys were growing. The cost of keeping them was growing. She trusted in some obscure providential power as tireless and indomitable as herself. At 11, she went to bed, going up the wooden stairs in darkness, in her stockinged feet. She undressed in darkness, her clothes falling away to be replaced by a heavy grey nightgown that made her body seem still larger and more ponderous. She fell asleep almost at once, but throughout the night her mind, propelled by some inherent anxiety, seemed to work on. She dreamed she was pushing the bicycle down the hill, and then that she was pushing it up again. She dreamed she was scrubbing floors. She felt the hot stab of the iron on her spitted finger, and then the frozen bite of icy sweets as she picked them off unthawed earth on bitter morning. She counted her money, her mind going back over the years throughout which she had saved it, and then counted it again, in fear to make sure, as though in terror that it might be gone in the morning. She had one relaxation. On Sunday afternoons, she sat in the kitchen alone and read the newspapers. They were not the newspapers of the day, but all the previous week and perhaps of the week before that. She had collected them from the houses where she scubbed, bearing them home on the bicycle. Through them and by them, she broke the boundaries of her world. She made excursions into the lives of other people, tragic lovers, cabinet ministers, Atlantic flyers, suicides, society beauties. In the evening, the boys at church. She worked again. She darned socks, the cups of jackets, cleaned boots, sorted the washing for the following day. The boys must look well, respectable. Under the new scheme, they went now to a secondary school in the town. She was proud of this, the first real stepping stone to the higher things of the future. Outside the night was windy, and she heard the now brief, now very prolonged moan of wind over the dark winter ploughed land. The dark winter ploughed land. She walked by candlelight. When the boys came in, she lighted the lamp. In their hearts, having now some standard by which to judge her, they despised her a little. They hated the cheapness of the candlelight. When they had eaten and gone lumbering up to bed like two colts, she blew out the lamp and walked by candlelight again. Tarlo had not come in. He came in a little before 10. She was startled, not hearing the bicycle. You want something to eat? No, he said. He went straight into the scullery. She heard him washing his hands, swilling the sink. Washing, swilling again. You want the light? She called. No. He came into the kitchen. She saw his still wet hands in the candlelight. He gave her one look and went upstairs without speaking. For some time she pondered on the memory of this look, not understanding it. She saw in it the wildness of the afternoon, as though the plate were hurting him, but now it had in addition fear, and above fear defiance. She got the candlelight and went to the door. The wind tore the candle flame down to a minute blue bubble which broke, and she went across the yard to the woodshed and in darkness. In the woodshed, she put a match to the candle again, held the candle up at eye level, and looked at the walls. The saw hung on its nail, but there was no bill hook. She made a circle with the candle, looking for the bicycle with dumb eyes. It was not there. She went into the house again. Candleless, faintly perturbed, she went up to bed. She wanted to say something to Tarlo, but he was dead still, as though asleep, and she lay down herself, hearing nothing but the sound of Tarlo's breathing, and outside the sound of the wind blowing across the bare land. Asleep, she dreamed, as nearly always, about the bicycle, but this time it was Tarlo's bicycle, and there was something strange about it. It had no handles but only Tarlo's billhook, where the handle should have been. She grasped the billhook, and in her dreams she felt the pain of the blood rushing out of her hands, and she was terrified and woke up. Immediately, she put out her hands to touch Tarlo. The bed was empty. That scared her. She got out of bed. Tarlo, Bill, Tarlo, Tarlo. The wind had dropped, and it was quiet everywhere. She went downstairs. There in kitchen, she lighted the candle again and looked around. She tried the back door. It was unlocked, and she opened it, looked out, feeling the small ground wind icy on her bare feet. Tarlo, she said. Bill, Tarlo. She could hear nothing, but after about a minute she went back upstairs. She looked in at the boys' bedroom. The boys were asleep, and the vast candle shadow of herself stood behind her and listened, as it were, while she listened. She went into her own bedroom. Tarlo was not there. Then she went into the back bedroom. The mattress lay on the floor, and she knew even before she began to look for it that the money was gone. She knew that Tarlo had taken it. Since there was nothing else she could do, she went back to bed, not to sleep but to lie there, oppressed but never in despondency, thinking the money had gone, Tarlo had gone, but it would be all right. Just before 5, she got up, fired the copper, and began the washing. At 7, she hung it out in long grey lines in the wintry grey light, holding the pages like a bit in her teeth. A little after 7, the boys came down to wash in the scullery. Here, here, Mom, there's blood all over the sink. Your dad killed a rabbit, she said. That's all. She lumbered out into the garden to cut cabbages. She cut 3 large cabbages, put them in a sack, and as though nothing had happened, began to prepare the bicycle for the day. She tied the cabbages on the carrier, 2 oil cans on the handlebars, and then on the crossbar a small bundle of washing clean, which she had finished on Saturday. That was all, nothing much for a Monday. At 7:30, the boys went across the fields by footpath to catch the bus for it. She locked the house, and then, huge, imperturbable, planting down great feet in the mud, she pushed the bicycle down the hill. She had not gone 100 years before. She had not gone 100 yards before. Out of the hedge, 2 policemen stepped into the road to meet her. We was wondering if Mr. Tarlo was in. No, she said. He ain't in. You ain't seen him? No, I ain't seen him. Since when? Since last night. You mind? They said. If we look around your place. No, she said. You go on up. I got to get down to Miss Hansley's. She began to push the bicycle forward to go. No, they said. You must come back with us. So she turned the bicycle round and pushed it back up the hill again. You could leave your bike, one of the policemen said. No, she said. I'd better bring it. You can never tell nowadays that what folk are going to be up to. Up at the house, she stood impassively by while the two policemen searched the woodshed, the garden, finally the house itself. Her expression did not change as they looked at the blood in the sink. He washed his hands there last night, she said. Don't touch it, the policeman said. Don't touch it. And then, suspiciously, almost in implied accusation, you ain't touched nothing. Not since last night? I got something else to do, she said. We would like you to come along with us, Mrs. Tarlo, they said, and answer a few questions. All right, she went outside and took hold of her bicycle. You can leave your bicycle. No, she said. I will take it. It's no naughty way up here from that village. We got a car down the road. You don't want a bike. I better take it, she said. She wheeled the bicycle down the hill. When one policeman had gone in the car, she walked on with the other, ponderous, flat-footed, unhurried. She looked as though she could have gone. As she scrubbed the floors at the poultry farm in the late afternoon, the police telephoned for her again. We can send the car for her, they said. I got my bike, she said. I will walk. With the oil cans filled, and cabbages and clean washing now replaced by newspapers and dirty washing, she went back to the police station. She wheeled her bicycle into the lobby, and they then told her now that afternoon the body of the man from London had been found in a spinney, killed by blows from some sharp instrument like an axe. We have issued a warrant for Tarlo's arrest, they said. You never found the money? She said. No, they said. No doubt that will come all right when we find Tarlo. That evening, when she got home, she fully expected Tarlo to be there. As usual, splitting kindling wood with the billhook in the outhouse by candlelight. The same refusal to believe that life could change made her go upstairs to look for the money. The absence of both Tarlo and the money moved her to no sign of emotion. But she was moved to a decision. She got out her bicycle, walked 4 miles into the next village to see her brother. Though she did not ride the bicycle, it seemed to her as essential as ever that she should take it with her. Grasping its handles, she felt a sense of security and fortitude. The notion of walking without it helplessly in the darkness was unthinkable. Her brother was a master carpenter, a chapel-going man of straight-grained thinking and purpose, who had no patience with slovenliness. He lived with his wife and his mother in a white painted, electrically lighted house, whose floors were covered with scrubbed cocoa matting. His mother was a small woman with scale eyes and ironed out mouth who could not hear at all. Mrs. Tarlo knocked on the door of the house as though these people, her mother and brother, were strangers to her. Her brother came to the door and she said, It's Lil. I come to see if you'd seen anything of Tarlo. No, we ain't seen him. Sum it up. Who is it? The old woman called. It's Lil, the brother said in a louder voice. She says, We have seen anything of Tarlo? No, and don't want. Mrs. Tarlo went in. For 15 years, her family had openly disapproved of Tarlo. She sat down on the edge of the chair nearest the door. Her large lace-up boots made large black mud prints on the virgin cocoa matting. She saw her sister-in-law look first at her boots and then at her hat. She had worn the same boots and the same hat for longer than she herself could remember, but her sister-in-law remembered. She sat untroubled, her eyes sullen, as though not fully conscious in the bright electric light. The light showed up the mud on her skirt, her straggling grey hair under the sharp lace hat, the edges of her black coat weather faded to a purplish grey. So you ain't heard nothing about Tarlo? She said. No. She said. No, her brother said. Be funny if we had, wouldn't it? He ain't set foot in his house since Dad died. He looked at her. He looked at her hard. Why? What's up? She raised her eyes to him. Then she lowered them again. It was almost a minute before she spoke. Ain't you heard? She said. Then reckon he's done a murder. What's she say? The old lady said. I never heard her. Mrs. Tarlo looked dully at her boots, at the surrounding expanse of cocoa matting. For some reason, the fissured pattern of cocoa matting, so clean and regular, fascinated her. She said, he took all the money. He took it all, and they can't find him. What's he say? What's he mumbling about? The brother, his face white, went over the old woman. He said into her ear, one of the boys is on a scholarship. She come to over to tell us. Want some to do? I should think. Don't she? Traipsing over here to tell us that? The man sat down at the table. He was very white, his hands shaking. His wife sat with the same dumb, shaking expression of shock. Mrs. Tarlo raised her eyes from the floor. It was as though she had placed on them the onus of some terrible responsibility. For God's sake, the man said, what did it happen? All all Mrs. Tarlo could think of was the money. Over 50 pounds. I got it hid under the mattress. I don't know how he could have found about it. I don't know. I can't think. It's all I got. I got for it for the boys, she paused, pursing her lips together, squeezing back emotion. It's about the boys I come. The boys? The brother looked up, scared afresh. He ain't they? I didn't know whether you'd have them here, she said, till it's blowed over, till they find Tarlo, till things are straightened out. Then they ain't found him. No, he's done a bunk. They say as soon as they find him, I shall get the money. Yes, the brother said, we will have them here. She stayed a little longer, telling the story dully, flatly, to the scared pairs of eyes across the table. And to the old strail eyes, enraged because they could not understand regarding her from the fireplace an hour after she had arrived. She got up to go. Her brother said, let me run you back in the car. I got a car now, had it 3 or 4 months. I will run you back. No, I got my bike, she said. She pushed the bicycle home in the darkness. At home in the kitchen, the two boys were making a rabbit hutch. She saw that they had something of her brother's zeal for handling wood. She saw that their going to him would be a good thing. He was a man who had got on in the world. She judged him by the car, the white painted house, the electric light, the spotless cocoa matting. She saw the boys with deep but inexpressible pride going to the same height beyond it. Dad ain't been home. Dad ain't been home, they said. She told them there had been a little trouble. They think your dad took some money. She explained how it would be better for them and for her if they went to stay with her brother. Get it to bed now, and I will get your things packed. You mean we gotta go and live there? For a bit, she said. They were excited. We could plane the wood for the rabbit hutch. They said, make a proper job of it. That night and again on the following morning, she looked under the mattress for the money. In the morning, of the boys, you know anything about the money? She said. 5 minutes later, she drove away with the inspector and two other policemen. In a large black car traveling fast, she felt herself hurled, as it were beyond herself. Mind and body seemed separated, her thoughts numbed. As the car entered the town, slowing down, she looked out the side windows, saw posters, Medford murder arrest. People seeing policemen in the car gaped, murder sensation man detained. Her mind registered impressions gravely and confusedly. People and posters were swept away from her, and she was conscious of their being replaced by other people. The police station, the corridors in the station, walls of brown glazed brick, fresh faces, a room, desks covered with many papers, eyes looking at her, box files in white rows appearing also to look at her, voices talking to her, an arm touching her, a voice asking her to sit down. I have to tell you, Mrs. Tarlo, that we have detained your husband on a charge of murder. He say anything about the money? He has made a statement. In a few minutes, he will be charged and then remanded for the further inquiries. You are at liberty to see him for a few moments if you would like to do so. In a few moments, she was standing in a cell, looking at Tarlo. He looked at her as though he did not know what had happened. His eyes were lumps of impressionless glass. He stood with long arms loose at his sides. For some reason, he looked strange, foreign, not himself. It was more than a minute before she realized why this was. Then she saw that he was wearing a new suit. It was a grey suit, thick, ready-made, and the sleeves were too short for him. They hung several inches before his thick, protuberant wrist bones, giving his hands a look of inner defeat. You got the money, ain't you? She said. You got it? He looked at her. Money? The money you took, the money under the mattress? He stared at her. Money? He looked at her with a faint expression of appeal. Money? He continued to stare at her with complete blankness. Money? You remember? She said, the money under the mattress? Ah, the money, that money, don't you remember? She shook his head. After some moments, she went out of the cell. She carried out with her the sense of Tarlo's defeat as she saw it expressed in the inert hands, the dead, the stupefied face, and his vacant inability to remember anything. She heard the court proceedings without interest or emotion. She was oppressed by a sense of increasing bewilderment, a feeling that she was lost. She was stormed by impressions she did not understand. I do not propose to put in a statement at this juncture. I ask for a remand until the 16th. Remand granted, cleared the court. This effect of being stormed by the impressions continued outside the court as he drove away again in the car. People, many faces, cameras, more faces, posters. The old sensation of mind severed from the body, of thoughts numbed. In the village, when the car stopped, there were more impressions, more voices, more people, a feeling of suppressed excitement. We will run you home, the policeman said. No, she said, I got my cleaning to do. I got to pick my bicycle. I got to pick up my bicycle. She fetched the bicycle, wheeled it slowly through the village. People looked at her, seemed surprised to see her in broad daylight, made gestures as though they wished to speak, and they went on. Grasping the handles of the bicycle, she felt a return of security, almost of comfort. The familiar smooth handlebars hard against her hands had the living response of other hands. They brought back her sense of reality. Miss Hansley, the cleaning, the poultry farm, the time she had lost, the boys, the money, the fact that something terrible had happened, the monumental fact of Tarlo's face, inert and dead, with its lost sense of remembrance. Oppressed by a sense of duty, she did her cleaning as though nothing had happened. People were very kind to her. Miss Ansley made tea. The retired photographer would have run her home in his car. She was met everywhere by tender, remote words of comfort. She pushed home her bicycle in the darkness, at Miss Hansley's, at the poultry farm, at the various places where she worked. The thought of the money had been partially set aside. Now, alone again, she felt the force of its importance strongly. With the beginning of bitterness in the empty house, she worked for several hours by candlelight, washing, folding, ironing. About the house, the vague noises of wind periodically resolved themselves into what she believed for a moment were the voices of the two boys. She thought of the boys with calm unhappiness, and thought of them brought back with renewed force the thought of the money. This thought hung over her with the huge preponderance of her own shadow projected on the ceiling above her. On the following Sunday afternoon, she sat in the empty kitchen, as usual, and read the stale newspapers. But now they recorded now not the unreal lives of the other people, but the life of Tarlo and herself. She saw Tarlo's photograph. She read the same story told in different words in different papers. In all the stories, there was an absence of all mention of the only thing that mattered. There was no single word about the money. During the next few weeks, much happened, but she did not lose the belief that the money was coming back to her. Nothing could touch the central core of her optimism. She saw the slow evolution of circumstances about Tarlo as things of subsidiary importance. The loss of the life he had taken and the loss of his own life as things which, terrible in themselves, seemed less terrible than the loss of ideals built up by her sweat and blood. She knew gradually that Thurlow was doomed, that it was all over. She did not know what to do. Her terror seemed remote, muffled, in some way incoherent. She pushed the bicycle back and forth. He pushed the bicycle back and forth each day in the same ponderous manner as ever, her heavy feet sloping dully beside it. When she saw Tharlo for the last time, his face had not changed, only way or the other, from its fixed expression of defeat. Defeat was cemented into it with imperishable finality. She asked him about the money for the last time. Eh, the money. You took it. What you do with it? That money? Under the mattress? For the first time she showed some sign of deep desperation. Please, what you done with it? That money, my money? And she knew that he could not remember. I came to take the boys back, Mrs. Thurlow said. He was silent again. He wetted his lips. He struck a match on the warm fire hob. It spurted into a sudden explosion, igniting of its own volition. He seemed startled. He put the match to his pipe, let it go out. He looked at Mrs. Thurlow, the dead match in his hands. The boys ain't coming back no more, he said. She said she was stunned. They ain't what? They don't want to come back, he said. She did not understand. She could not speak. Very slowly he said, it's natural. They don't want to come back. I know it's hard, but it's natural. They are getting on well here. They want to stop here. They are good boys. I could take them into the business. She heard him go on without hearing the individual words. He broke up, his face relieved, like a man who has liquidated some awful obligation. They are my boys, she said. They got a right to say what they shall do and what they shan't do. She spoke heavily, without bitterness. I know that, he said. That's right. They got a right to speak. You want to hear what they got to say? Yes, I want to, she said. Her sister in law went out into the yard at the back of the house. Soon voices drew nearer out of the darkness, and the two boys came in. Hello, she said. Hello, Mom, they said. Your mom's come, the carpenter said, to see if you want to go back with her. The two boys stood silent, awkward, eyes glancing past her. You want to go? The carpenter said, or do you want to stay here? Here, the elder boy said. We want to stop here. You're sure of that? Yes, the other said. Mrs. Thurlow stood silent. She could think of nothing to say in protest or argument or persuasion. Nothing she could say would, she felt, give expression to the inner part of herself, the crushed core of optimism and faith. She stood at the door looking at the boys. You made up your minds then? She said. They did not speak. I will run you home, her brother said. No, she said. I got my bike. She went out of the house and began to push the bicycle slowly home in the darkness. She walked with the head down, lumbering painfully, as though direction did not matter. Whereas coming, she had seemed to be pushing forward into the future. She now felt as if she were pushing forward into nowhere. After a mile or so, after a mile or so, she heard a faint hissing from the back tire. She stopped, pressing the tire with her hand. It's slow, she thought, it's lost me. She pushed forward. A little later, it seemed to her that the hissing got worse. She stopped again and again felt the tire with her hand. It was softer now, almost flat. She unscrewed the pump and put a little air in the tire and went on. I better stop at the shop, she thought, and have it done. In the village, a cycle shop was already in darkness. She pushed past it. As she came to the hill leading up to the house, she lifted her head as a little. It seemed to her suddenly that the house, the outline darkly above the dark hill, was a long way off. She had for one moment an impression that she would never reach it. She struggled up the hill. The mud of the track seemed to stuck at her great boots and hold her down. The wheels of the bicycle seemed as if they would not run, and she could hear the noise of the air dying once again in the tire.